Hello and welcome. My name is CallSignFinal, and in this video I'll be going over my complete builder's guide for the Elite Force Umarex MP5SD6 Competition SMG AEG. The Elite Force Umarex MP5SD6 out of the box is a solid option for beginners due to its surprising performance for a moderate cost. However, say you have purchased one, plan to purchase one, or have acquired another version of this gun from a different company and wish to make upgrades to your MP5SD6. There are many options for the MP5, but the MP5SD series lacks variation in the field of upgrades, where there are some things that aren't sold or manufactured by any companies or are limited to being sold by just one or two companies. Out of the box, this gun is surprisingly snappy, even with a 9.6 volt nickel metal hydride small Tamiya battery. Also, it is incredibly accurate, which makes up for its limited range that comes from this SMG style platform. When in doubt, sling as many BBs downrange as possible when it comes to this gun. However, it is actually a very good option for indoor CQB, but lacks the advantages other platforms have when it comes to upgrading it for advanced indoor play. For instance, the external upgrades of this gun are lacking in many fields where some upgradable parts aren't even being made by actual manufacturers. Like my polymer M-Lock handguard, which I had 3D printed by a seller on the Hop-Up Airsoft Seller app. The seller goes by Predator Customs or William Brown. He makes M-Lock, Keymod, and Picatinny 3D printed MP5SD handguards made out of PLA plus plastic in any color you'd want. If you wish to acquire one from him, I'm sure he'd be more than happy with your business. However, if you already have a 3D printer or have someone who does, there is actually files for sale for every variation of the MP5SD handguard that can be downloaded for a small fee. A tip for those who acquire one of these 3D printed handguards is to sand it with a fine grit sandpaper to get rid of all the blemishes and plastic strands that hang from the edges upon completion of the printing process before installing it on your build. My suppressor is also aftermarket, made by Classic Army, and is made from aluminum with a threaded front cap that exposes a hollow cylinder that has removable foam rings. This allows for a drop-in tracer unit to be placed inside with a very small modification using electrical tape to stabilize and center the tracer unit so that it lines up with the BBs leaving the barrel. The only brand that sells them, which ships stateside, is Matrix from Evike, if they are in stock that is, which when I purchased mine, they weren't. The biggest thing people will want to purchase is the MP5 sight mount. Mine is an NC Star MP5 sight mount, which I purchased from Amazon, but there are many brands that make them, as this is a universal need across all MP5 platforms. The thing most people will break, just like me, is the MP5 charging handle, as it is made from cheap pot metal. However, ICS makes replacement parts that are universal for most AEG MP5s, though there are brands like Matrix that make sleeker designs to further customize your build to make it stand out from others on the field. However, if you do by chance buy an ICS charging handle for the Umarex MP5, just know you'll need to cut down the arm slightly and lengthen the flat side to get it to fully insert enough for the screws to go through. Also, if you ever find yourself losing the handguard pins like I did, ICS also makes replacements for the handguard pins and body pins. They are heavily sought after replacement parts and are often out of stock, but there are a few companies who actually make these and are sold stateside on Evike. Lastly, the stock has many options, as it is universal across all MP5 platforms. However, if you wish to convert your build to rear wired so you can have a bigger battery, it is an absolute necessity to get a full stock with a removable butt plate or a buffer tube adapter for an M4 stock. Note, the full stock has a massive space and the battery will shake around, so getting some sort of foam or bubble wrap to slip over your battery is a must. Now, for the internals of this gun, there are a few proprietary MP5 internals that aren't universal version 2 parts. Specifically, they are the tappet plate and the nozzle. The nozzle is a standard 20.35mm MP5 nozzle length, like this one. I bought the wrong one when I first started, which was meant for an MP5K and was having feeding and FPS issues. Now I have the right one, which makes my gun a crisp 329 to 335 FPS. The tappet plate is a slimmer version of the version 2 tappet plate, which has trimmed edges that wrap to the head. However, an SHS version 2 tappet plate can easily be modified to fit with some sanding or cutting of the excess trim until it fits. Do check that it moves back and forth while the shell is closed and at least partially screwed together before continuing. The trigger contact, which looks something like this, and the selector plate are proprietary for all MP5s of this level, where it uses the selector plate to conduct a jumper signal to complete the circuit for the gun to fire. I removed the brass fitting on the selector plate and installed an SHS trigger contact with slight modification to make it fit. However, I used the stock trigger trolley and set it up with a signal wire setup to a Gate Nano AAB MOSFET with a complete rewire using Gate branded 14 gauge wire. The trigger is also something that is proprietary to the MP5, but brands like Matrix make replacements. However, for fans of trigger MOSFETs who have the budget to buy one, Jeftron makes a Leviathan version 2 MOSFET with a custom MP5 flat trigger or a curved trigger as an option. Though, this is very pricey and should only be purchased if you absolutely know what you're doing or should be done by a reliable tech. The remaining internals are all version 2 or universal internals like the cylinder, spring, gears, and bushings. This gearbox shell is 7mm, so I'd recommend SHS 7mm bushing bearings to replace the stock bushings. The piston head, and cylinder head are all regular version 2, but as mentioned, the tappet plate and the nozzle are specific to the MP5. These are the stock internals, which leave much to be desired, but one redeeming quality is that the piston has a full steel rack. However, every other item is made from cheap plastic. Practically everything should be replaced, and a thorough cleaning should be done to remove all the stock grease, as well as any buildup or debris. Then some quality grease like Superlube should be used to completely lubricate the gun before reassembly. The barrel assembly or hop-up parts are decent, with all things considered. The inner barrel can be polished to remove all blemishes, which provides better accuracy. The stock hop-up chamber can be kept as there are basically no upgrades available for it. The bucking can easily be swapped to something like Maple Leaf to better increase accuracy, range, and FPS consistency, all while still using the stock nub. Mine is a Maple Leaf Macaron 60-degree bucking using the stock nub. Now, to finish this up, I have a few tips for anyone wishing to acquire the Elite Force Umarex MP5SD6 with the intentions to upgrade or modify it. Tip 1. Do not HK slap the charging handle. It will break. If it doesn't after once or twice, it will after about 5 or 6 times. Just don't do it. Also, if you convert the gun to rear-wired, glue in the handguard pins, as they do fall out very easily. If you wish to convert it to rear wire, it is actually split wired to where it has a small Tamiya connector right as the wires leave the back of the gearbox shell. These can actually be unplugged and converted to rear wire very easily if you have a small Tamiya compatible plug-in extension. If you plan to use the one that runs from the front, it can be taken out and used to run to the rear, but it is taped in place and requires the gun to be completely disassembled before removal. Tip 3. Polishing the cylinder and inner barrel is the best way to reduce cost when upgrading this build, as the barrel is 210mm in length. This means you'd have to really search for a compatible barrel, because as of now, I only know of one company who carries that length, which is Lancer Tactical. Also, the cylinder and inner barrel are already decent. They just need a good polish to make them perform better. Tip 4. If the suppressor can be bought stateside, do it. However, if not, do not order it from Classic Army. I had mine get snatched by US Customs and Border Protection for literally 2 actual years, and it took several petition letters to get it back. Just don't if you can avoid it. Tip 5. If you get a 3D printed handguard, sand it before you install it by using higher grit sandpaper. Do not go lower than 400 grit, but try to get rid of all the loose plastic fibers that are hanging off the edges. Then, if you want to, paint the handguard, but for reference, I didn't. Tip 6. Get a mushroom piston head and cylinder head. It will dampen the noise and is incredibly immersive for an SD style platform. Also, shrink mod your spring to reduce the rattling vibration sounds to lower the overall decibels of the gun. Tip 7. You cannot upgrade the inner barrel, hop-up chamber, or bucking without completely disassembling the gun. Also, the gearbox cannot be removed from the upper and put back in without disassembling the upper completely. Also worth mentioning, the gearbox will slide out of the upper, but will not slide back in without first disassembling it. Tip 8. The stock motor actually has a 27 TPA D-type armature, so if you want to put it in a neodymium motor can and make a freaking torque motor with it, then you can. Tip 9. This gun is not the most solid polymer gun, so it will make noises a lot and doesn't feel all that strong. So, just know what you're getting into. Also, the Umarex polymer mid-caps are the same, where they are fragile and have poor build performance. Do not buy them. Tip 10. If you can reuse parts, like the full steel teeth piston or the inner barrel, then do it. Save the money if possible, as this gun has very good performance out of the box. It just lacks range, but makes up for it in accuracy, snappiness, and the low sound levels, even when completely stock. Note that this gameplay is when the gun was completely stock. However, this video is the freshly completed upgrades. That's all I have for the tips, but if you have any further questions or wish to see anything further regarding my build, simply ask in the comments below and I will help you if I'm able. Some of the things regarding the MP5 I only know based off of trial and error from working on this gun for so long. However, every item on this build worth mentioning will have links in the description if you're interested. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments below what you think of my build or my builder's guide video. This is CallSignFinal, signing off.